Welcome to Warblog. Today I'm going to play this game again. Essentially, I did play this just yesterday, and I was sort of sitting there actually, and I wasn't really thinking too much. But I was looking at the video, and I thought, hang on, I could play this slightly differently because this is all what happens in the initial stage. You get some units come down here. These units take an absolute age getting across here, and we defend. And so what sort of happens is there's an engagement there, as you can see. And the units get pushed over this way, and then I think these ones get retreated into there. So you can sort of see how that's sort of changing. And then they get eliminated. And obviously these units are coming across quite slowly from here. Obviously more reinforcements are coming over here. But what I'm thinking is that all this time, because things are moving so slowly, that instead of just sort of leaving these here and leaving these here to defend, obviously, which is the intention, I can actually come out and attack and destroy these units, which is what I'm going to try and do. So I'm not going to play for that long, but hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate a point, or at least use it as a simulation to see how that works out. So it's the Houthis. So obviously they're going to do the same thing. Actually, there's something else on this. No, I thought for some reason maybe these were ill configured because they seem to be moving quite quickly. I mean, they've moved up all their movement points, but I guess that's how it is. So they can come in here and do this first attack. It's like a chess opening, and I don't think there's any reason not to do that. That's it. So that's the opening move. And like any chess game, I think you can sort of say, well, is that the right thing? I mean, we could have moved this way, we could have moved this way, but I think any other sort of movement would be counterproductive. Unless that is, of course, we determine that the Hadi strategy is successful, in which case we could leave these here and wait until all the other units are available. Similarly, we could not move forward, but we could move down, try and cut this road off before the reinforcements arrive. So essentially we've been defeated there. It was 4-1, so we could have possibly hoped for a good result, maybe an exchange. That would have been good, but we didn't get that. But what I'm saying is that if we do this, I mean, at the very least, in the first instance, this might bring about a different result. It's an exchange. Okay, so now they've got more units to bring in. Do we want to actually engage these units, or do we want to try something else? It should be a 1, okay. And attack these units. DR, and here, because of the situation, I think it might be worth probably get a 2-1 against these. I think it's going to be worth at least trying to keep the aggression up. Exchange, okay. But they didn't get... Exchanges are okay for a regular unit. Okay, so these units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I'd rather just take them across the country. Okay, so the Haddies are engaged in a particular strategy that is challenging. I think we've got to go for these units. I mean, essentially we've got to beat them. I think this strategy is not going to work. I'm not sure this strategy is going to work. I mean, the thing is, I'm tempted in two ways. That is to play it again immediately now, to see whether I can just get the dice rolls in my favour and see whether it would work in that regard, or whether or not the strategy itself is fundamentally flawed, because it does come down to dice rolls. I'm going to give it another go, actually. Okay, so again, now I'm going to do the same strategy again from the point of view of the Haddies. Because in theory they shouldn't be party to knowing what their extended strategy is. Right, so again they're going to try that stupid strategy that I just made up. So we need a win on this one. I mean, really, that's what we need. We need to win. And it's one of those games where you see, I could play this again and again until I get the right dice rolls, which is cheating. I'm allowed to play it again because I didn't put him into the battle. Would that have made a difference? No. Not at all. But I'm going to play it again, just because. Just because I'm playing with a strategic idea, and I think that it's okay to do this. But I'm definitely generally not in favour of reloading until you get the right strategy, until you get the right results, because that's cheating. Oh, I know how you got there now. So again, we've done that. We've got the DR. He's there this time instead of there. End the turn. Okay, so we're going to do our 1-to-1. However, the fact of the matter is, we're not going to get the 6-to-1. Right. We're not going to get 12. But an exchange. I'm not going to play it again, but I think you get the point. Let's just go on for the next turn. So again, we bring these in here. But in this instance, I'm going to try something different. You see, I mean, I think it's fair enough to take advantage of the situation in whatever capacity offers. And that's the key to some extent to how I think about these things. You know, you can't really sort of say, well, I'm going to do this, but if an opportunity arises, and that's what you're sort of hoping for, an opportunity that arises that you can actually capitalize on. Not to say that you're not necessarily going to get your immediate objective, but if you were, you know, I mean, obviously you aim for that, but this is one of the things, you see, I've always tried to be sort of clever in this regard. Whenever I look at a strategic situation, I always think, well, that's the obvious, and then I try something different. But the thing is, usually the obvious is the thing that you've got to do, and so you end up with sort of like, oh, I think I'll outflank across these hills, and they're like, you know, the result of it is your units are not in the game for like 20 turns, by which time the game's over, and yeah, it's quite sad, really. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that because I think I've demonstrated my point. You know, the Haddies can sort of try and proactively attack. I mean, they've done their move, haven't they? So let's just see what happens on the next turn, because they've got to take their base back now. Oh, look at that! That's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. I'm interested in that. That is so remarkable. Because we can still attack these units. they're likely to be a 4. We're not going to get the odds. Right, it's got my interest now, so I'm going to go for another round. So they're getting reinforcements. Let's get into this town. Give us the super defences. Get rid of this police unit. Oh, what was that? An exchange. Now here, we're really sort of messed that up a bit. But we got a D result there. But I don't want to do that. Can we afford to attack this base? Probably not. Exchange. Okay. So the Haddies are slightly heartened with their recovery from their strategic blunder. It's interesting though, because they regained it on a 1-to-1, whereas it's that 1-to-1 positive result that I was trying to get in sort of just replaying it, considering that it was elusive. And I think, that's one of the things that I think it just sort of supports my theory that you can't keep replaying it until you get the results you want. I mean, that's just not what this game is about. I mean, I did it for experimental purposes, and I've never really done it before, but I just think that there's a possibility for a proactive strategy in this, and that will be demonstrated now. In me doing this. Two to one. Oh, so near a 3-to-1. Oh. See, if that had been successful, this game could be going in the sort of direction that I was hoping it might. But I'm not going to play anymore because I just sort of wanted to give that a go. I was looking at it, I was sort of thinking, hang on, we could do that. But I think it's going to be, generally speaking, it's going to be more difficult because you've got to get that, you have to get the edge from that strategy by turn 6. I mean, it's turn 4 now. They'll be there turn 5, and then turn 6. All these units will be on it. So if you haven't done it by turn 6, it is going to be completely irrelevant strategy, because the whole idea is you take these units out, completely eliminate them by turn 5, and I think that that's just not possible anyway. You need DE results like 3 times in a row. But the thing is, I think it's interesting to sort of speculate on the permutations, because essentially it could go any way. No, that's not what I meant to say. I was drifting off in my thoughts there. It's interesting to consider the permutations, because that's the nature of the game. So you're sort of thinking, well, it is possible to play that strategy under these circumstances. But I think the key thing that I was sort of trying to get to is that, and the tantalizing issue is that if they had slightly more powerful units, slightly more mobility, they might be able to pull it off. But because they can't really get more than one hex at any one time, I mean, these mechanized units are rubbish in the hills. They don't have any sort of fast-moving irregular units, and these things seem to be sort of super fast, considering that these units can't go anywhere. And I'm never satisfied with the overall movement situation, because it's quite difficult to configure movement in this game. Not because it's quite difficult, because there's like 25 different terrain types. You have to bear all of them in mind, and each unit type has a movement allowance specific to the terrain. I mean, I could simplify that in some way, but basically that's how it is. I have tried to sort of keep it consistent so that all foot troops move at the same rate, but some are faster than others. Clearly, irregulars are faster, but mountain troops will be faster in hills, but we don't have any of those. Obviously, things like Recce units, command units move faster. Other things have their own sort of movement rates. So, for example, electronic warfare units might have their own specific rates based on the fact that they're probably quite lighter, to sort of, to move around in general. But I mean, I think engineers move a little faster than ordinary units. But above and beyond that, the Hadi forces are they're tantalizingly under strength. They're all just ones there, and they don't have the movement to do that. So the thing is, what I was sort of contemplating, not sort of contemplating, but I thought, well, if I were to give the Hadis, say, something extra, for example, if I gave them an artillery position in the first instance, and that's not something that maybe I couldn't do. What I'm saying is, what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't sort of adjust things so that they have a bit more of an edge. This is a walkover for the Houthis. I think no matter how you play it, the Houthis are going to win this game. But that's what they did historically, so I'm not going to change it so that it's difficult. But I think in the confines of things, so that what that means is I'm not going to add a 3-3-3 unit, for infantry, because that would just make them stupidly unbeatable in these hilly terrains. Even if I just gave them one, it would be sort of representative of an unfair advantage based on the fact that they're not very good, based on the fact that they don't really have much of an edge at all in the game. And I think you still have to play it in the long run, because they do get reinforcements. So it's, again, the game is not about this first stage and winning this first stage. I think the game overall is all about playing the first few stages with the intention of taking as minimal loss as possible, in the hope that when the reinforcements come on by, say, turn 10, you can then develop a much stronger position. The Houthis need to they need to inflict as much damage as they can earlier on, so that when the reinforcements come on, they don't have that that combined stacking power, because some of the units that do come on later on in the game are 3-3s. I think that's the case, and once those get into a hex, even with one of these other units, they'll become a lot tougher. I would be interested in playing actually that extended strategy, although it's the normal rational strategy. I don't think it was what I played yesterday consciously, but the thing is, what I played yesterday was exactly the same strategy. But I think the other thing was that I didn't. I didn't. It's not so much I didn't, but I was unable to open this road up. You see, these 3-3s. You should think, they're only infantry, they're not very good, mobile. Whose turn is it? But if I can get those and put one of them in there, suddenly those objectives become really difficult. So I might still not be able to attack. But the thing is, once he gets his artillery on, that's why I probably need some artillery. And I think it might be worth putting some artillery on here, just so that they can get some kind of attritional value against the Houthis, to give them a bit of a nudge with regards to the requirement to be a little more competitive going forward. I think I might do that, but I'll have a think about it, and I'll probably forget, and it will never get done. So I'm quite satisfied if that's how it works out. But it's definitely an interesting game, and again, it's just another little game that has enough variance in it to make it quite compelling, in the sense that I think you've got to sort of, there's plenty of scope here for discussing what could and couldn't happen. I think that's the amazing thing about this sort of game, and it's not what you see in any other game. And I don't want. I don't want to sound too boring when I constantly sort of bring that reference up, but there's always the scope that there's always this sort of situation where no one's seen any of the other videos and don't realise how fixated I am on how awesome my game is in comparison to how rubbish everything else is. But the thing is, you can actually sit here. I mean, obviously, you get the drawing tool, which is the most amazing thing on the planet. And let's take red. Obviously, we got a particular setup and arrangement that's accepted. With these forces coming in like this, and obviously we got that, and clearly what you can do is you can consider the variance of possibilities, and what I'm trying to get to is like a chess game. So you can sort of say, well, obviously the scope is to move these down here. It's not a chess game in sort of there's anything particular. Now, for example, here we might say, well, we've got some other choices. We could actually start to bring these on. Now that we've got awareness of this, well, he's going to move 2. He's going to be 1, 2. Remember, there's artillery coming on after this as well. 3, 4, 5. So 6 movements to there. For these guys, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Zone of control. However, the reason they blocked it off last time is because they moved these units down here. They got such movement that they were able to do that, which is a bit odd. Again, it's one of these other things, just like the terrain. I'm going to have to sit down one day and think of movement completely. And the thing is, it wouldn't be difficult. I could do it in a day, but it's a whole day. But the point here is that you've got this sort of this strategic sort of setup, and you can sort of you can look at it. Unlike other games, I've never seen anyone sort of say, this is the game, this is the setup, what are my options, and annotate them in some way, or detail them, or just communicate them in such a way that you can say, well, if I was that person, I can see their point of maybe trying to do this, but I would maybe trying to do that. They're not. They're just click fests. They just sort of, you never really understand what they're doing, why they're doing it. I mean, especially these games where you have like a tank unit or artillery unit or an infantry unit, but there's only one unit per hex ever. And so you sort of, you'll have this artillery unit sort of dug in, and you can attack it with your tanks, and the artillery unit defends and blows up all your tanks, and it's sort of like, it's just so stupid. Not just for the fact that it's artillery defending so well against tanks, or maybe they got anti-tank rounds, But the point is that, you would never have a situation where all you had was artillery defending like a mile wide section of terrain against an armored column. It would just never happen. You'd have a mixture of infantry support. You would have a mixture of, say, some armored detachments. You have armored positions along the route. But I mean, but the point is, you sort of say, okay, I'll attack them with my tanks, and that fails, and then you move them out or something, or you come in from another hex, and you say, okay, now I'm going to attack you with my infantry. Maybe you do the infantry first or second, but it's just because it's got a factor of 3, and it just there's no sort of strategic intent in regards to any of that. You don't sort of think, well, actually, I would have done it this way. Whereas here, you can actually sort of draw these lines and think, well, what are the implications here? And I can't see too much because I've got all this writing on there, so maybe I should just get rid of it. But so for example, there's enough going on in this game to sort of to sort of provide that sort of variance of thinking, but it's not so mind-blowingly complex or challenging. There's no sort of, wow, this is the most amazing puzzle ever. It's just a situation, and I think the whole game represents a continual barrage and range of situations like this. I mean, some of the more complex games provide multiple instances of what's going on here, but I think you don't need more than one. That's the whole point. When you've got a strategic game, why play a game that's going to take 5 weeks to play, every weekend and a couple of evenings, when what you're doing, you're trying to get what I call the money shot, the interesting aspects of a particular situation. And there all contained and simple, playable in half an hour, discussable in half an hour. And, that's our point. I think you should be sort of thinking, well, you should be pausing. And we've only played 4 turns, and I've played it 3 or 4 times now. Obviously only once in earnest, twice in earnest, and a couple of replays. But you can sort of sit there and say, you in a short space of time, you can get that blast, you can get that what's needed. And I'm not saying that every other game doesn't necessarily offer that, but I think when it comes down to sort of communicating that and demonstrating that, when I watch YouTube, which I do quite a bit, my sort of spare time, I sort of think, I look at these games, and you never ever see anyone that presents anything that has any sort of scope for participation in thinking about the possible strategic permutations of what's going on. So what I'm really referring to more directly perhaps is sort of the comparison with chess. Now, I don't really like chess that much. I like it as a game, but I can't think like that. It just doesn't work for me. I get stuck on a couple of moves, and it's a different game. But I do respect it in that context, because it's so archetypal, it's so well known, it's so well purposed for what it is. It's very clear that you can think 1, 2, 3 moves ahead or more, and that's the beauty of it, because you can actually sit there and critically consider the possibilities and the variances, and other people can challenge those perspectives and opinions about the possibilities. That's the key thing, that you don't get in just about any other war game. You don't get situations that, well, if I was you, I would have gone in with the artillery first and then pushed them along that road and done this. Whereas here, you've got that. We got this. We had the lines. I've removed them, but we could do something else with these units. We can say, well, what should we do with these units? And I put them in a big line here, but in the first instance, I could have committed them to sort of taking this road. Now, I don't know where they started, but if they started there or there, I think if they started there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's still going to take absolutely forever to get towards that road. But I mean, etc., etc. Now, obviously, what I did in the first game is I got these units because they move so fast, and so obviously I would probably say, okay, what actually got to do is I've got to preserve them to some extent, because I actually want, because if I can get them down to that road, I can cause enough disruption here that they just don't get past. They get stuck on the road, and although I take a bit of a hit from the artillery that comes on, the vehicles and the artillery just never get into the main battle, and so the whole of Dahl and the armoured brigade camp fall. And so I think I got it right in the first game. But this replay, was really more to analyse the options for the Haddies. But I think in the first game I got it right, almost subconsciously or unconsciously. I played, I think, when you consider what could be done here and what might have otherwise been done. Because the thing is, if we were to play this more archetypally without considering those options that I just sort of mentioned, I might be sitting up here battling on a front line here, moving these onto a front line, even committing these to reinforcing, say, one front line coming from the top here. So, I mean, for example, I mean, the only reason they're there is because they were pushed out of the armoured brigade camp. But if we still had there, we could be, we could push all of these this way, could push these this way, so we could have this sort of front like that developing. That could be sort of, how we were doing it. So we've got everything pushing down here, and likewise we've got the Haddie defense line more like that, with these obviously falling in between, and that could have been how I played it, and that would have been maybe not as good a strategy. Obviously, the difference here being that I'm committed and aware of the opportunity to intercept these units and to create that line. But anyway, that's all I'm saying, and I'm just digressing because I think it's important that that this is the concept of strategic thinking. And I've always been aware and happy to admit that I'm rubbish at chess. Thinking, I think one of the things about thinking I'm very much aware of, and it's something I'm thinking about actually quite a lot recently, is that it's an interesting concept in its own mind, in that I sort of think, well, I'm actually not very good at thinking, but I think I'm good at thinking, and the thinking that you're good at thinking is enough to some extent, especially when you play on your own. It's you don't need much more than that. Playing opposed, I think, from my point of view, it seems like a bit of a luxury in this day and age. Not so much a luxury in it as a sort of an unwarranted privilege, but not everyone really cares to give up large chunks of their life to play stupid games. Most people seem to have, say, an anchor in the real world and doing real world things, and so getting an opponent that can sort of play this, and this is why again and again and again why this game is so good, because it's not designed to take up hours and hours. You could do this in a tea break. You could convince someone in a working environment, say, listen, we'll do all these other things, we'll climb Mount Kilimanjaro, because it's a real world activity that's going to be fun. But in this tea break, let's play this game. And they'll say, okay, because it's not going to take that long. You can do it online with 2 players. You can print it out and, on the work computer without telling the boss. You can do it at home. There's so much that you can do. I mean, you could play this on a big screen and just take it in turns with the keyboard. But, it's easy to do, to get it over and done with. And you end up at the same time, it's like, well, you've done this process of thinking. I think the only other maybe counter argument to all of that is a lot of people seem to be more in the favour, or have a bigger interest in the wealth and depth of the background. I'm not saying that very well, but what I mean is, people are sort of say, well, what do I like out of a game? And I've heard this on videos, and it's not just The game has to play well, and I think this plays well. This has enough permutations consistently to play well from a strategic perspective. But I think the other point is, for example, the map. Is it compelling? And I love these maps, but I think, to some extent, no, these are not very good maps from the idealized world of unrestrained, boxed real world printed on cardboard and paper hex encounter games where you get maps that are essentially, cartographic art in their own right, and that basically presents a layer or level of interface that constitutes a depth of play that people find more engaging or involving. I'm just not really saying what I want to say. What I'm saying is people, they think they're playing a really good game because the aesthetics are good, it looks good, and that's why they think, I really enjoyed playing this because the counters and the maps and the supporting information it makes me feel as though I'm sort of playing something, as opposed to maybe playing a sand map game. A sand map game, I just made that term up, but it's basically what I'm trying to say is, you could just draw this on a bit of paper. I mean, in military terms, obviously what they do is they draw maps in sand, and then they move units around, and they say, well, what about this or what about that? And the point is that that's not going to be as much fun, in the sense that, I mean, they do it because it's a working tool, because they're obviously engaged in war, so they do it. But the thing is, you could say, well, okay, I'll do that at home, but it's rubbish. You wouldn't really get that sort of feel that you were doing things in the same sort of way. And so I don't know what I'm talking about now, really, but I know what I'm sort of trying to get to is that what I'm saying is, I'm just acknowledging that is more from a game than just the ability to analyze the strategy, because that's what this game really excels at, in my opinion. I've not seen anyone who can sit there and analyze a strategic or a tactical situation. I don't like tactics because it always reminds me of squad leader type games, and to be quite honest, they just don't appeal, because you can have units here and sort of say, well, this unit is going to fire at this unit, and so every unit, you never know really what any one unit can do, because you can't, unless you look at them. Oh, it's a rifle squad, so they can fire up to 10 hexes, and then you can look at it, and you never, you can't really know what it is. Oh, it's something else, but they can't only fire 2 hexes, and so here it's all about the movement, etc., and it's visibly obvious, etc., etc. But anyway, I'm going to leave it at that because I've completely warbled. I know what I'm trying to say, but to be honest, I can't even remember the original point now, so I'm not going to sort of try and labour it anymore. But yeah, I hope you find that interesting. I mean, what I think you should find is that you sort of think, hang on, this bloke's an idiot, but I can see what he's trying to say, and I want to play this game, and I want to win as the Haddies, because that's the challenge, I think. And you can do that by signing up and playing, etc., etc. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll speak to you later. Cheerio.